It usually happens at the worst possible moment. You are trying to fall asleep, or you are in the middle of a shower, or you are sitting quietly on a bus watching the city go past, and then, without any warning, your brain just serves it up. Something you said at a dinner party 3 years ago that landed wrong. The way your voice cracked during a presentation. A text you sent that you immediately regretted. A moment where you walked into a room full of people and completely forgot why you were there, and everyone looked at you and you just stood there. The memory arrives in full detail, sometimes more vivid than the original moment, and for a few seconds you are entirely back inside it. You might wince, you might make a noise, you might press your eyes shut as if that will help. It does not help. And then you spend the next several minutes trying to shake it off, wondering why your brain does this, wondering what is wrong with you, wondering why you cannot just let things go the way other people seem to. Here is the thing though, other people are not letting it go. Other people are lying awake, replaying their own dinner party moments, their own cracked voices, their own awkward doorways. This is one of the most universal and quietly exhausting features of being human, and almost nobody talks about it directly, because talking about it means admitting it, and admitting it means reliving it all over again. So let us talk about it directly. Your brain replays embarrassing memories, often and uninvited, and there are real and understandable reasons why it does this. Once you understand those reasons, the replays do not necessarily stop, but they lose some of their power. They start to feel less like evidence of something broken in you and more like a very old, slightly overzealous alarm system doing exactly what it was built to do. The first thing worth understanding is that your brain is not randomly selecting these memories. It is not torturing you for sport. It is prioritizing them specifically because they involve something that mattered to you, other people's perception of you. Human beings are, at the most fundamental level, social creatures. For most of our history on this planet, being accepted by a group was not a preference, it was survival. Being excluded, being seen as unreliable or strange or incompetent, carried real consequences. So the brain developed a very strong interest in tracking moments where we might have damaged our standing with other people. Embarrassment is essentially social pain. It is the feeling that registers when we believe we have fallen short of the image we want to project to others. And just like physical pain, the brain treats social pain as important data. It flags it. It stores it with more emotional intensity than neutral memories. It returns to it, partly to process it, and partly because some part of our ancient threat detection system is still asking, how do we make sure this does not happen again? This is where a concept psychologists sometimes call rumination becomes relevant, and the word just means what it sounds like, a kind of circular mental chewing. The brain loops back to a difficult memory, not because it enjoys the discomfort, but because it is, in its own clumsy way, trying to solve something. It is scanning the memory for information. Could the situation have gone differently? What should you have said? What does it mean about you? What do those people think now? The problem is that for embarrassing memories, this kind of review rarely lands on a satisfying answer. The moment is over. You cannot go back and fix it. So the loop continues, returning again and again to a problem it cannot resolve. There is also something worth knowing about the way emotional memories are stored in the first place. Experiences that carry a strong emotional charge, whether fear, joy, shame, or embarrassment, tend to be encoded more vividly than ordinary ones. The brain seems to treat emotional intensity as a marker of importance. The memory of what you had for lunch on an ordinary Tuesday 3 weeks ago is mostly gone. But the memory of the time you called your teacher Mum in front of the entire class in year 4 is still there in high definition, ready to play on demand. And the brain, when left without a task, tends to drift toward unresolved things. This is why the memories surface in the shower, in the quiet before sleep, during long commutes. The default mode, the wandering state your mind enters when it is not focused on anything specific, has a natural pull toward unfinished emotional business. Embarrassing memories are, for many people, the definition of unfinished emotional business. They feel unresolved because the thing that was damaged, your sense of how others see you, cannot be directly repaired from the inside. This plays out in recognizable ways. You might find yourself mentally rewriting the scene, rehearsing what you wish you had said, constructing the perfect response you did not have at the time. Psychologists sometimes call this a post-event processing, and it is very common in people who care about social connection, which is most people. Or you might find yourself scanning for evidence of whether the damage was real, wondering what that person thinks of you now, replaying their expression at the moment it happened, looking for clues. Sometimes the memory is not even from this decade. Sometimes it is from childhood or early adulthood, a moment so old you can barely reconstruct the context, but the feeling is still intact. The feeling does not expire the way the facts do. That is its own kind of strange, sitting with the emotional residue of something you can barely remember clearly anymore. What makes this harder is a particular quirk in the way we estimate other people's attention. We tend to assume that moments which felt enormous to us also felt enormous to the people watching, but most of the time this is not accurate. The people in the room at that dinner party, at that presentation, in that hallway, were managing their own internal weather. They had their own worries, their own self-consciousness, their own things they were hoping nobody noticed. The moment that lodged itself in your memory as defining and catastrophic was, for most of them, a brief flicker and then gone. This is not a guarantee, and it is not meant to minimize real social consequences when they exist. But the gap between how much we remember our own embarrassing moments and how much others remember them is in most everyday situations very wide. Understanding this does not automatically stop the replays, but it can change how you respond when they arrive. One small shift that tends to help is simply noticing what the memory is asking for, rather than trying to suppress it or argue yourself out of it. Suppression tends to backfire. The brain treats the effort to not think about something as evidence that the thing is important, which makes it more likely to return. Noticing, on the other hand, is gentler. It sounds something like, "There is that memory again." The brain is flagging something that felt like a social risk. That makes sense. That is what brains do. From there, the question is not, how do I make this go away? But rather, is there anything actually unresolved here? Or is the loop running on old data? Sometimes there is something real. An apology you never gave, a conversation you need to have, a pattern you genuinely want to change. In those cases, the memory is useful. It is pointing at something worth addressing. But often the loop is running on old data. The event is over. The consequences were nowhere near as significant as they felt, and the brain is still scanning for a solution to a problem that has already passed. If that is the case, sometimes it helps to gently close the loop yourself, not by deciding the moment did not matter, but by acknowledging it and letting it be what it was, a human moment in a life full of human moments. You misread the room. You said the wrong thing. You froze. So has everyone. The capacity to feel embarrassed is, at its root, evidence that you care about connection. That is not a flaw. That is one of the most human things there is. This is offered as general insight into how the mind tends to work, not as a substitute for professional support if any of this touches something deeper for you. The replays will probably keep coming. The brain is not going to stop doing what it was built to do. But there may be a little more space now between the memory arriving and the wince that follows. A small pause where you recognize what is happening, where you see the alarm for what it is, an old system doing its job, rather than evidence of something fundamentally wrong with you. You are not broken for replaying these moments. You are human, which has always meant carrying things, turning them over quietly, wondering how you come across. Most people are doing exactly the same thing on their side of the wall. If this felt like something you needed to hear today, there is more here. Subscribing means the next one will find you when you need it.